Hey,
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to German Chocolate Life of a Mixed Girl. I'm Jessica Vivian, aka German Chuck. And today I have another special guest here. It is Vanessa Garcia, fellow voice actress. We've got to know each other over Instagram and follow each other there. Vanessa does the cool voiceover collaborations with other voice actors a lot of times, or like Disney, Pixar, all the cool things. Go check her out. And she also I'm going to step away real quick. Got featured in a UK-based film and entertainment magazine called Real Social. You can also check it out on her LinkedIn and Instagram. So cool about the voiceover journey. So welcome and thanks for joining us. Hey, Vanessa.
thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
And Vanessa is in LA area. That's where she lives. That's where she's from, local. A little jelly because there's so many voice actors that she gets to meet. And anybody that's listening here that's also a voice actor in Florida, hit me up because it's lonely.
Socialize. Networking is really key. It's fun. You make friends, and also job opportunities are out there too. So that's a good thing.
Very, very, very true. And you might think that this is another VO Corner episode, but actually, we might do that one day. It came together from we were doing a collab to Anna and Elsa Frozen, and Vanessa was like, "Hey, fellow Latina," because she saw a TikTok where I was doing a comedy bit from Gina Brion where I was saying Latina, and I was like, "Yeah, I get that a lot," and so racial ambiguity became the topic because she said, yeah, I get the opposite experience on that end. So we realized, okay, all right, people think I'm Hispanic or Latina because of my name and the way I look. And then Vanessa, being fair-skinned, gets the opposite a lot of times. So yeah, you even wrote your thesis paper on this topic.
I did. Yeah. When I was applying to colleges, I did a personal statement on how a lot of people perceive me as too white to be Latina and too Latina to be white. And finally, when I went to college, I went to UCLA, I decided to rush for some sororities. And it was very interesting experience because literally my personal statement became a full-blown social experiment. I'm a double majored political science and sociologist. So it was very interesting to just see that actually play out in real life. I literally was rushing for 11 sorority houses and I only got invited back to 2 the first day.
Oh, were they the ones you expected, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, well, those because I had friends in those houses. So it's not like everyone was like, oh my God, how are you? What's your name? What's your major? What year are you? And like literally it was that conversation for 4 or 5 times per house. Literally, I could have just had like a voice box and just hit play and say, hi, I'm Vanessa Garcia. My major is this. And I was just like, really? And then when I started rushing for a Latina sorority, I mean, I am fluent in Spanish. I'm conversational though. So I'm not like full on, like my parents, they're full on Spanish. You know, my mom's Peruvian, my dad's Mexican. And like they taught us Spanglish. So it's literally Spanish and English. So when they talk to me in Spanish, I totally understand them 100%. But when it's like, you know, I respond to them, it's in English. So, you know, when I was rushing in my sorority, I didn't really fit the culture because I didn't know if it's Vicente Fernandez and like Vicente Fernandez, and see, I can't even say that. And so it was too much of like, I was too white for them. Like I wasn't really fitting into the culture because I was not too Mexican or too Peruvian for them. Like I understood some like cultural references, like, you know, like Don Francisco and stuff like that. But like, I wasn't fully entrenched in that culture either.
I can
So
totally relate to that because
yeah,
when I lived in Germany, I never really thought about anything. I was just like German, but I was brown. Nobody really thought of anything. And when I lived in Detroit, it was interesting. I was actually seen as like black, just light skinned, even though I didn't
yeah,
understand a lot of like American stuff, not necessarily related to black. And then when I lived in New York, I was around a lot of Hispanics, so they knew I wasn't. So I didn't have a home there as much, but I just like blended in. I was like, all right, let me learn like all these words. And that's how
right.
I found my ex-husband. But my son, like what you said, I speak German to him. But
Mhm.
even with my own family, we do Denglish, Deutsch, German,
English.
and English.
Okay.
So when he understands everything too, but sometimes he'll throw the English words in too. And when I feel really like, okay, today I'm going to correct them, I am like, okay,
Yeah.
what would that word be in German? But the black thing, like I live in Florida, so um, I'm like, cool, there are not too many black people. So when I do get around, they don't really see me like as part of them. Like there was a Juneteenth event and like this white lady asked me to like help, like, do you have time to volunteer? I was like, yeah, I have time. Let's go help set up. And I go there and I'm like, yay, kind of, I guess more white than anything, anything too. And I'm
Ah,
not Spanish, but then the you could tell like the black people when they were seeing each other, like, yeah, yo, hey, and they were
yeah.
like
Yeah.
excited. They didn't even acknowledge me at all, and that happens to me here all the time because black and Latin a lot of times don't get too
You don't get
along. So
right. Right.
I don't have a home either. I don't have a home.
It's unfortunate, really. It really is because I mean we have a lot of like cultural similarities, you know, and that's I mean I have a lot of like friends from all different races, genders, whatever, and I love learning the culture. You know, like if I like to say I don't want to be willfully ignorant if I could avoid it,
Yeah,
right? Like because we all have something to contribute to each other that we just grew up with and we did never knew that was ignorant, right?
yeah,
So
exactly,
like
yeah,
so like you know I guess that's also the beauty of being like racially ambiguous because literally you grow up with a sensitivity of knowing that you're different and you don't want to perceive that with other people. You don't want other people to feel different, right? You want to
yeah.
be inclusive.
But I ask
And
people so many times in the sense I'm like, oh, I can tell you're probably like something, and some people are like they would rather want to blend in. So some people do
right,
get offended if you like notice they have an
that's true.
accent or something. But I was like, just be
Right.
authentically you. It's like fine, but I can't force anyone to be authentically them. But I feel like that. Well, people say oh, my Barbie was never my skin color, my weight, or anything. I don't know how you feel, but maybe because I'm just not one thing, I never felt that way. I also don't feel that I can't be anything because I never seen anyone like me. That would mean I could never be anything because there are probably not a lot of people that are mixed like me, CEOs as something or major actors. So I've never had that. So it must be crazy. And I really don't know what it must be like to grow up either fully Latin or fully black or Asian or something and feel like you can't do something because you're that one thing. And here we are just trying to fit in somewhere. So we're just like,
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a predominantly Asian community where it's like half Asian and half Latinos. So I was like literally competing with Asian friends. So I think that's where like my kind of like competition and like my nerdiness came in because like literally my friends were like competing against like, ooh, who got the straight A's, who got the, you know, who got a better grade than someone, you know. So like literally my upbringing was different. And it was just because basically it's the nature versus nurture, right?
yeah,
Like, you know, you're surrounded by a certain culture and you're like kind of embracing it, you know. So when I went to UCLA, it wasn't like a culture shock, like how it was for a lot of people that I've met in school. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's predominantly Asian and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, it's home. Like, oh, like I know them. And, you know, so it was like, for me, it was easy for me to fit in to that culture because I was already immersed in that culture.
oh, that's
So
so
like,
cool.
you know, and it was like half Latino, half Asian with my high school. And then when I went to college, it was like almost the same thing, but like with more diversity. You know, I have like Indian friends, I have like Jewish friends, and then I have like Black friends. And like with each like subgroup, they all taught me something different. And I was just
Yep.
like, we just had this conversation. Like I'm a Libra. and I like to have like a balance of things. And I like to know that like I could kind of be a chameleon where I can go. Like I like to have like throw out my individualness, but I also like to be like, hey, like I like to be part of the group. And like, you know, like for example, my African American friends, like they taught me how to dance in like a certain way, or like, you know, my Indian friends taught me like Punjabi, and I was just like, it's very culturally mixed. And so like I like to, long story short, it's like I like to be sensitive with all the cultures just because I'm different and I know how it is to be different.
Yeah, it's really an advantage. Like I actually just
Yeah.
shared on LinkedIn a TED Talk from America Ferrera, and it was so good how she was talking about, well, you know, I'm a Latina, so they're going to book me, but then I don't sound like a Latina,
Right.
but I look the part. And then, but if I want to play this, and they want a wider role or someone skinnier, and she's like, well, my genetics are that way. I like try to lose weight, but it's not me. And to just be authentically you. And I find like voice acting, it might be a little easier for us because we just need to sound a certain way. If I want to be a teen boy or I want to be an older lady, or like hey, I'm just like whatever, like so and so, then I can be that too. And as long as I can portray it, that's what acting is. But I don't have to look the part so people are not confused.
Well, actually, I did hear the contrary of that too. One of my voice actors, shout out to Nisa Ward, she's African American, but she had voiced the concern that because she's Black, she's like typecast to playing Black characters because of her ethnicity, and she was just like kind of like pigeonholed, and not in a bad way, but it's just like she was like she always wanted to voice other characters besides being African American characters.
Yeah.
And so I think it also has to do with practicing. I think we've discussed this before, practicing your voice and like the command of your voice, you know, like this is like my authentic voice, but I don't sound Latina, you know, and it kind of, I think it goes with training your voice to sound different other than your ethnicity. Because I would assume that African Americans have a certain way of, you know, an accent when they talk to each other versus when they talk to like white people. And I've seen this.
That's that happen. Switch in Big Mouth and on Netflix. It's really funny.
Exactly. And you know what I'm talking about. Like it's the, you have to put on your white voice, you know, your customer service white voice, where you don't sound like you're from a different culture. You sound like you're from America. You know, like kind of like that.
The British. I actually talked to a voice actress, and I mean, I don't have permission to probably say her name that happened, so I'm just going to tell the story. She said she had been casted for a role. It was a white character, and then they saw that she was mixed, but like a little bit darker than me, mixed, and they were like, "Oh, we can make this character Black." And they wanted her to sound Black, and she's like, well, I don't know how to sound like that. So she had to go to a voice coach to learn how to sound Black to play that newly created Black character.
What?
Yes.
So they changed the character based on her appearance?
Yeah, but then she couldn't sound like it authentically, but now they really wanted that.
Oh my God. See, and that's, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with being too ethnically inclusive like that, because I mean it's kind of like affirmative action, right?
Yep.
And we could have like a debate on this all the time. I am from the school of like your merit. You know, if you gave the performance that you gave, you should be the right person for that role.
That's what acting is about. That's all I think. It doesn't matter what your like background or anything is, you can act it.
Exactly. And it should not matter your skin tone, your gender, your sexuality, whatever. Like it should not matter. It should be based on that role or on that character that you are auditioning for and then running with it. And it helps. It helps if you have that cultural background, right? Yeah. And I'm not trying to knock down what the industry is doing right now.
Oh yeah, I know what you
It's
mean, but
great,
it's going
you
definitely
know?
in a direction where it's not, again, not fair anymore. You have a
Right.
smaller pool, or they don't sound like, so if
It's
fair is,
becoming, and I'm scared that this might become a reverse racism,
yeah,
and I don't like that either, because that's too extreme of what we're trying to do, right? Like
yeah,
I'm part of the fairness group. If a white person beats a minority person, it should be because they did a better role
yeah,
for that audition. It should not be because, oh, she's white and she's better than this minority, or vice versa, right? The
yeah.
minority is better because of whatever, should not be like that.
Especially in voice acting, it's like,
Especially, yeah, because like we're not acting on camera.
yeah.
Like, it should not matter if like that's the case.
But
And
I love Danny Chambers, for example. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram. She does anime. So I wonder if, depending on, if it's SAG-AFTRA things, that they're maybe more that way, and anime is a little more open because they're like non-union. But Danny Chambers voices so many incredible characters and changes her voice in a way. She's like tiny little girls with like pink hair and all kinds of things, and she just voices it all. And I'm like, that's incredible. And like I said before, I'm usually not the person to be like, whoa, there's finally someone that does it, even though a lot of people feel like I need to show that I can do it, but it's just based on her performance. She is a great voice actress, and if her voice fits, that's exactly how it should be.
right. No, I totally get it. It's kind of like how Hank Azaria, he did the voice of Apu on The Simpsons, and he had to step down from playing Apu because of the whole like, oh well, that's a stereotype, you shouldn't do that. And
Yeah.
like, I'm appreciative that the industry is becoming sensitive to race and racism, but to what extent are they taking it too far? That is kind of up in the air right now. Like
Yeah, we're in an interesting time, definitely.
yeah,
And we're both in our mid-30s too, so it's already not easy
right,
to get in. But now
exactly,
we're like, don't fit a certain type if they're trying to typecast a certain thing.
right.
So I'm really curious to see over the years where we're going to be, and to be part of the fairness group.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I want to know how the industry is going to treat minorities in the future. Like I love that like people like us could finally have a chance in the industry. I'm very grateful about that. So I'm not knocking what the industry is doing, but I am really concerned about how enforced it is right now. And
Yeah.
it should be like not like a quota, but it should be like a fairness of like, let's have like a all around diverse group of a cast.
Well, it's almost like what happened with the women movement. We need more women in the business. So it's kind of similar to that
Yeah,
in the sense. And then you have the racial, the sexual orientation,
right.
and all of the things. But getting back to the story. So you had the one sorority story. I'm now really curious, which sorority did it end up being that you joined?
I didn't join any sorority, honestly.
Is
It was a social experiment for me. Let's put it that way. And I think it was because I didn't rush my freshman year, or else I would have probably, got accepted to more sororities. But I think it was because I rushed my junior year, the start of my junior year, and I knew the girls already in those houses, so I kind of had an advantage because I knew a lot of my Jewish friends. So of course, like I was in, the Jewish sorority. They were like, yeah, like we'll get you in. And then I had like another, which ended up, by the way, like my friends became my friends outside of the sorority. So I'm just like, why do I have to pay for friendship? I mean, not downing, like
call.
not putting down sororities. I'm just saying, like, you can make friends anywhere, pretty much. So
yeah, it might just be easier, I guess. You have people come from certain walks of life, but I 100% get it. It seems super stressful. The pressure also, like you said, you're interviewing. But in terms of racial ambiguity, what was like the first experience you had, like a story where you said, oh, That's what they think or don't think. It could be, I mean, you were little, maybe even, or in the industry, maybe. So.
Well, there are certain events that like uh, pop out, like especially when I was in like high school. I was in AP US history, and I remember like my one of my classmates was mentioning because I said something to the effect of like, well, not all Latin people are like that, or something like that, to that effect. And then I always remember one of my classmates saying, "Oh, I forgot you're Latina." Or like, I forgot you're from Peru or from Mexico or something. I forgot you're not white, basically, is what they said. And I was like, yeah, that's it. And then another time was when, well, multiple times growing up in LA, I would be wearing, like, for example, my UCLA sweatshirt. And then I would be riding like an elevator with other people. And I would always get this question, and it really bothered me. Did you actually go there?
No, shut the front door.
Multiple times. Multiple times.
I'm like super impressed in general to know somebody who went to UCLA, but for somebody to say that, that's just rude.
Like
that's...
like as an elevator conversation, you know, like, and this happened also at Disneyland on the ride to Space Mountain. I was wearing my UCLA sweatshirt, and they're like, you know, this one person turned around, saw my sweatshirt, and said, "Did you actually go there? Wow." And then, you know, it started bothering me to a point where I was like, I actually did, you know, and I actually double majored, and I actually graduated. And did you actually go to college too? Did you go there?
That's funny that you say that, because I was just going to say, if you could put something on your shirt, one thing from all the frequent questions you ask, what would your shirt say?
I actually went there. You know, that would be it, because I'm a Latina. And, you know, statistically, Latinas don't do this schooling. They don't go to college. They're not educated, you know, and it bothered me, like, to the point where I had to literally tell them off. And then they're like, "Oh, my son or daughter or my nephew went there." And I'm like, okay, but not you, right? You didn't go to there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's interesting that you say that, because before I was always like, when people thought you were Black, that was already like, oh, you know, it could be hit or miss, but more and more Black people, you find them. But then when I took on the Spanish last name from my ex-husband, all of a sudden I felt like whenever that name was on something, you know, I'm not taken serious. I might not be smart, intelligent enough, or the worst thing, that I don't speak English. I go to a doctor's office to assign me to a med tech that barely speaks English, and then it's a really awkward conversation because they speak Spanish to me, but I'm not. I can kind of understand, but I can't really speak. So then we're both kind of with hand and feet, or I get like a pamphlet that's like in Spanish. It's like, even if I did speak Spanish, you should just assume that my first language is English.
They're assuming the other way around. They're assuming that like Spanish was their first language.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then I'm like, well, it really then, because you don't see, like what you said, a lot of Spanish people in higher positions. So then with that name, it just right away infers like maybe, you know, that just can't really be anything. So.
And that's just, and yeah, and that's like the bipolar opposite. Is like, you're already categorized as something that you're not. You know, and that, I think that's just like the whole assumption of everyone, like, especially everywhere. It's like, you assume you're something, therefore you're in a box, therefore you cannot get out of the box. So it's just interesting.
Get out of the box. It's definitely like funny shirts. I don't know. There's like an older episode I did where I did put something that had like, because you know, pregnant ladies have like shirts, and they usually say, "No, I don't know what it is," or "I don't want to tell you. I don't have to name it. No, you can't touch my belly," or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's how I came up with the idea of like, you should just have like a shirt of the most common thing. No, I'm not Spanish. No, I'm like this. I'm German and African American and blah 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 blah.
God.
I always feel the need to, like, when I go somewhere, I'm like, Jess, don't blurt out everything you did, or you were in the military. They have a master's, but it always ends up being like a weird conversation where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a combat veteran. Where also the same thing what you said with UCLA. A lot of times you go and there's like veteran something, and then they think the guy was the veteran. I'm like, no, I'm the veteran. And it happens to a lot of.
That's an awkward like conversation to have. You're like, no, I'm actually it. You're like, Oh, you. Oh, and you get
Especially
that
if you
like full
smile.
expression.
I
Yeah,
went
you're
to
like,
a
that's weird.
I went to like a job fair for like teaching. I was like, maybe I'll substitute a little bit on the side. But they were looking because they were like hurting for teachers everywhere. And I was sitting and I'm smiling always when I'm somewhere. It's like my friend, I'm like, oh, okay, smiling. But then people always want to talk and someone's like, oh, are you here to be the grade school teacher? I was like, no, I was helping the high schoolers. I'm like, yeah, I was in the military. Oh, what did you do? And then they think you did something dumb. I was like, I was a military police officer. And then all explain this. And I'm like, I had the school bus driver like thought he could talk to me about something because I'm always like happy and smiling. I was like, okay, let me tell you this. That's not how things work. I can like switch this face
Ooh,
real easy.
nice. The command.
It comes out. So like people always like judging, even like, and judging is like the big thing, like judging by your color, your name, or by how you act. If you're too friendly, then they might think they can walk all over you. If you're like serious,
That's
they're like,
another
oh, babe,
thing.
put on a smile. Maybe you.
Oh my God. That, it's funny you say that because like my smile gets me in trouble a lot of times. People think I'm like flirting with them, think I'm too
That's the Libra
nice.
in you. That's the
Yeah, well,
Libra.
it's the natural charm. You're just like, hey, I'm naturally friendly. And then they're like, oh, are you hitting on me? I'm like, no. Where did you get that? You're like, oh, because you're smiling at me and you're like having a
Yep.
I can't just be nice. Like really, like
Eye
I have to be like,
contact too.
like
Like you look at
bitch,
people and then
resting face on, leave me alone. Like it's so weird.
speaking of that, that's actually a funny thing in dating life. I don't know. Are you on dating apps or something else where that comes into play as well?
I literally gave up on dating. I'm on the let's see what happens and voiceover and follow my journey of life. And it's also interesting too because like I'm queer, so I'm bisexual, and it's just interesting because it's like another layer on top of my differentness, on top of my gender, on top of my sexuality, and it's just very interesting that like that also plays a role in
I think
like
I'm
my dating
curious
life.
about that. I do have a question because I was asked like at work, you now have to fill out the things, which I don't understand why I have to share like my sexuality at work. But I mean, it, if you, I feel it's like a benefit almost because if you don't look at, is it like a man or a woman, like whoever, like the charm sparks to it should be
Right,
easier, right? Because
right,
you're not going to double date anyone in the sense. Because I always
right.
feel when just because I say I'm straight or whatever, I might not be. I might have just not found the woman that you know what I mean. Like I don't know, so just I don't want to claim a title.
Honestly, that's exactly how I feel. I feel like it's just, I haven't found my person yet. I haven't found the person. I'm like narrowing it down. I'm literally on that self authentic thing, like journey. And like, if that person comes in my life and it's like complimenting my life, then I will totally go for that person. But as of right now, it's like, I'm literally focusing on me. I mean, it would be nice to have a partner one day soon, hopefully. I'm not getting any younger. So yeah, it's just another layer on top of like the ambiguity I already
Yeah.
have with my identity. It's like everyone's like, oh, you're also from like the gay community. I'm like, yeah, that's another layer. Yeah. So it's very difficult, and just I try to maneuver it as best as I can, and especially like when I get hit on from people, and it's just like you have to explain the whole story, and like instead of explaining the whole story, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm taken, and
Yeah.
it just
Which
you
that
don't want.
doesn't hold people back either. I once wore a
Yeah,
ring
and
just
that's another thing like that happens too. It's like people actually get more bold to ask,
hmm.
oh, well, maybe maybe you want something different. I'm just like, oh, come on.
Do they still say that? Oh my God.
Which is why like I gave up on the whole argument itself. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend or something like that. Like, like especially if I'm like not interested, like genuinely interested in that person. I actually had someone in the supermarket recently ask me that. He was striking up a conversation while I was like picking up avocados. So I was like, I'm picking up avocados, and he's like, oh, how's your day going? Do you have anything planned on the weekend? I was just being nice, okay?
Hmm.
Being nice, had a smile on my face, even though I had a mask on, whatever. And I was just like, oh, I'm doing this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, have a nice day. He literally follows me to like the potato section.
Oh.
And he's like, I would be a complete idiot if I didn't ask for your number and take you out on a date. And I'm just like, you're sorry, I have a boyfriend. And, and I don't want to go through that route of like my sexuality, whatever. It's too much. I just went for groceries. And then I was just like,
stories are worse than others, but the whole following thing is always so creepy whenever it does happen. I'm like, I feel flattered, but also creeped out.
Yeah, like I am flattered. I'm like, I'm glad that like I can have a genuine conversation with someone and they think I'm actually flirting with them. It's just conversation. And so, yeah, that's like another layer on the layer.
I think now I have more like mean face all the time. But I think it's because I'm thinking so hard all the time. So my face is always like this. So my mom was taking pictures of me a couple months ago when I went to an anime convention with my son. And I was like cosplaying for the first time. And she took pictures. It's like, ew, do I look like that all the time? I look freaking mean right now.
Wait, with your cosplay on?
Yeah, I was like, but my face was like just because I think I'm staring at the computer all the time. So I'm like, so I'm like on that side, I just have that like computer face. But I used to when I'm just out, like be more open. So way more people would talk to me, and I was really like, blah, blah, blah.
It's also a different time too. Like, we've, because of COVID, we've all been kind of secluded from people. So we don't really remember how to be cordial, civil, act in society anymore. Which is sad because now it's like everyone, I joke with my parents about this. I feel like everyone's like a mutant of what they used to be. Yeah, everyone has changed since COVID. Like, it's not like the usual friendliness. There were mean people, but now there's more mean people.
Oh, yeah.
Resting bitch face that treat you rudely. And it's so interesting, the times.
So disclaimer. So, hey, if you see me here and you see me smiling, you see me somewhere else, I'm not smiling or have resting bitch face, maybe. Because just smile, maybe I'll smile back. Just remind me. Because sometimes there's been a time, like some people don't realize they have it. Sometimes I'm like, hey, like, how's your day going? I say something to like the person behind the counter or whatever, because you seem, stressed or whatever. And then they're like, oh my God, really? And then they're like, don't realize that maybe they had just 20 other customers that were just horrible and they're stressed, but actually they're actually really nice. So sometimes you can peel the layers of people with the Libra charm.
we have layers. We're like ogres, like Shrek, and that's another thing is like, when you see people like that, you kind of have to remind them of like humanity, and you're like, oh, well, I hope you have a nice day, or say something nice to them. And like literally you like night and day, their like expression changes and they're like, oh, thank you, you too. And like, and I've done that all throughout the pandemic. It's like, I always had to be like, how's your day going? Like, how are you? How's your day? What else did I say? I'm like, oh, do you have long on your shift? Like, have anything, and it's interesting that people get like oh, you actually care kind of like reaction to that, especially like after the pandemic. Like, everyone's just trying to get through the day. And it's just like, it's sad that people lost that humanity in them,
Bringing it back person by person. I always say, if it's just one person, doesn't matter if it's the videos, you and I make, or on the street, like you said, just ask someone genuinely if they're like, how they're feeling, and like, actually listen, not just like say it, like, I like your shirt and move on. Even though I like your shirt can still be nice. But
it's a conversation starter.
Yeah. I can't believe we gotten through so many things, and I love it because I always just talk myself about all the things and the experiences I had. So to see it from someone who actually grew up in the United States, in California, in such a cultural environment, going through the opposite of what I went through, it's so nice. I think I'm going to name this episode, What's Your Flavor? I kind of like it.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good one. I feel like, what was that name? Craig something? Craig. What's Your Flavor?
David. Yeah,
Craig David. Yeah, I like that song. Yeah.
And to round this off, my son said earlier something, and I really liked it. It was so sweet. He saw something like somebody having a school bus, and they turned it into a house. And I showed him that a voice actress on Instagram that we follow each other kind of did the same. So he's like, Mom, this person does the same as your coworker. I was like, what coworker? And he like explained it. I was like, oh, it's so sweet. So now my voice actor friends are my coworkers. I like it. So I'm just going to be like,
well, it's also manifestation because actually they could be your coworkers.
Yeah,
you know?
it's so sweet.
Like, you never know about that. The industry is very, very big, but very small at the same time. Like everyone knows each other. So like or knows of each other at least. So it's just good to like have a good commonality like that.
It definitely is. So I love this. So I know this won't be the last time that we talk on here or in general, and I'm definitely going to bring you back for a VO Corner episode sometime in there, and then we can do more of that. So thank you so
much. We totally love that.
And I hope you have a wonderful day out today. It's not too muggy, hopefully, because it's muggy in California, you said earlier.
Yeah, well, actually now the sun's piercing out, so hopefully it's but we also have California fires right now, unfortunately. So it's just a bunch of things. But yeah, thank you. I hope you have an awesome day too in Florida.
Thank you, and talk to you then. Bye.
Yeah, bye.